Welcome to the Meditation Podcast. This episode was actually taken from the Awakening Podcast. And because we've covered a lot on meditation, breathwork, and awareness, that I've included it in this. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Welcome to the Awakening Podcast. You can find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org. I'm also on BitChute. And I've got 4 other podcasts, and I'm a podcasting coach, and you'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. Today, please welcome my guest, Bo Bissett.
Hi, Roy. How you doing?
I'm very well. So I suppose you might, I know you've created Amo Ni, but you might just introduce yourself. Who's Bo?
Yeah. Amo Ni is a multidisciplinary healing system that I created in response to my own self-sabotaging that I did for almost 40 years. And I tried everything I could get my hands on. I tried meditating and Tony Robbins and Joe Dispenza and there's obscure healing techniques over here. And I'm in Taiwan, so over here. I read books and tried mantras and affirmations, and just nothing, man. Nothing turned the needle for me. Nothing changed my perspective. Never got to the beliefs that I was carrying that were limiting me from experiencing not just an abundant life, but that's just what I would call just a normal life. I was always just kicking myself kicking myself while I was down. And it was I went through this system that was created by this Australian guy. It's called the spiral, and that's when things clicked for me. And a lot of what I was dealing with changed almost immediately when I started doing the work that I'm doing now. And just I had a immediate physical response, just cried tears of just, joy and also disappointment in myself, because I realized as I started doing this work that like I was my own problem. Like I was the one who had put myself in those shoes, right? And so yeah, and then from once I started doing this work, my life changed, and it started changing pretty rapidly. And so Amo in Spanish means I love, Ni in Chinese means you. And together, obviously, it means I love you. And that's the goal that I want when I work with people, to have them be able to have that same epiphany, right? For them to look in the mirror and to be able to say that I love you to themselves and actually mean it. We use muscle testing, kinesiology, a meridian chart to tag the emotions that we find with muscle testing around the body. And then we use the Amo breath, which is a breath that I created. It's a 3-part breath that uses visualization and also humming, which stimulates the vagus nerve, syncing the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And then we use neuro-linguistic programming at the end of each session to help grease the wheels of intention and push the individual further down their path of their hopes and dreams. That's what it is.
Excellent. So what because I'd like to touch on all them things, but I'd like to kind of go back first and go through your journey. And mainly it's kind of because sometimes when people hear a story, it triggers something in them, or they'll think of somebody that they can relate to, which in turn then can see the solution.
I got you. Yeah, I grew up as a normal, what I thought was a pretty normal kid in a normal family. Grew up in a small town in America. I did have a lot of resentment, a lot of anger as a child. That started manifesting as like injuries when I was really young. Like ankle. I played a lot of sports. My father was he played golf in university, and then my grandfather played, I think, 1 year of professional baseball, like way back in the days. So sports was always a big part of my life. But yeah, from an early age, I was always getting hurt, spraining ankles, breaking ankles. And then when I was 15, I blew out my knee, just completely blew out my knee.
And was the sport pushed on you, or was it something that you actually wanted to do? Because sometimes that can happen with parents as well. They'll push, against their own wishes. Yeah.
Well, my dad did push sports on me, but I enjoyed sport, and he made sure that I tried like different sports, and he was like, just give it a try, get out there and play around, and so there were some sports I didn't enjoy, but like I had no problem, or he had no problem after I tried and didn't like it. He was like, all right, you did a season, all right, you don't want to do that anymore, that's cool. But one of the biggest things, the anger when I was a kid, and then also when I was 12, my parents divorced, and when they sat my brother and I down to tell us that they were getting a divorce. Like I said, I grew up in a small town, and like I didn't know anybody I knew what divorce meant, but I didn't know like I didn't have any friends or families that had been through that, right? So my parents told me, and my initial reaction was I got up out of the seat that I was in and just ran out of the house and just ran away. And I went back home later that night just because I was hungry, right? And I was a 12-year-old kid and I didn't know what else to do. But that was my pattern, just running. And I ran using drugs, I ran using alcohol. And then later on in my 20s, I just basically packed up and left America. Just started bouncing around the world teaching English and using drugs and alcohol just to completely crush myself. I mean, I got in 2 accidents when I was 19. I was in a drunk driving car accident. It was a single car accident. It was my fault. I ran off the road going like 100 miles an hour, went through a telephone pole. I woke up the next morning in intensive care. And then 2 years later, I did the same thing. And it's just ridiculous, man. And I was just beating myself and self-sabotaging myself every way I could, financially, with partners, with women. I'd find a nice girl and then just run away from her, you know. And I did that in Spain. I did that in Vietnam. I did that in Taiwan. I did that in Mexico. Just like I did that in the Czech Republic. It's just like everywhere. And that it just ran and ran and ran, and it finally caught up to me in my late 30s. I was in Vietnam at the time, just drinking just profusely, and I lost everything. I called my brother up. I was like, man, I need some help. And he helped me get back to the States. I got on a bicycle, rode across the country because I thought maybe I could turn my writing into something like a blog and do some travel writing. That didn't work, so I ended up back with my aunt and uncle. They were helping me get back on my feet. And my aunt told me she came in one day as I was, doing some work and told me that she had breast cancer. And right then, I looked in over the next couple of days, I just kind of looked at myself in the mirror. I was like, dude, here's somebody that's done well, done all the things right, and she's got breast cancer, and here you are, just completely like. You're just ruining, you're driving yourself into the ground, like get it together. And so that was my spark to stop drinking. And that's just from there I started reading and doing everything I could. But it was just like I said earlier, man, just nothing was pushing it. Nothing was like materializing for me. It was this the frustration was there, the anger was still there. Like I would meditate, and I'd be fine while I was sitting in the chair, right? But as soon as I got up and life started happening, it's like wow, lose it again. So with this work, I finally figured out, that the emotions that we program as kids, like those are that's it. That was where my answer was. In fact, one of the first books that I read when I first started this journey was called Molecules of Emotion. It was written by a female doctor. She was like a prominent doctor, like neurophysicist or something like that. But what really caught my attention was that our emotions affect us on a molecular level. And I was like, oh man, so that's my key, you know. It took me like, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years later until, all the pieces fell into place. But yeah, that book definitely resonated with me. And when I did finally find the work that I'm doing now, it was like, I was like, I knew it. That was it. So,
I think it's the journey as well, because we're always searching for. You just know when something is right, and
mhm.
the fact that you just tried all these things, Tony Robb and all the different ones, and yeah, some work for some people, but like I say that the memory of pain poisons us, and it's deep within, and sometimes it's squashed. And I think like I have seen that with say the breath work, how somebody, they release a trauma, and you're looking at them, if you're in a facilitated event, and like they're seriously breaking down, but then afterwards it's like they've got it. They're kind of free from something they didn't even realize that was deep within them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing, man. It's really like when I went through this work, when I first went through this, I'm about let's see, you're in let's see, I'm about 178 centimeters and about 70 right now, about 78 kgs, right? And when I finished going through this work, it was a 7-week course, and when I went through it, I was 68 kgs. And like, I'm not somebody that should lose 10 kgs. I'm not somebody that should lose 5 kgs, right? So, and it was just like, my body was just, the word embody, right? So we embody emotions. We actually like physically take emotions on and like hold them into our body. And as I was releasing them, it was like my body was shedding those emotions and the physical matter that those emotions were attached to. And like it was a literal, physical, emotional, psychological transformation. I mean, just amazing to connect with those emotions that I had used to dictate, how I was leading my life, right? It's, and that's the scary part, is that, our subconscious is there to look after us. It runs all the behind the scenes things, like keeping our heart rate going, our heart going, and lungs pumping, and hormones going, and all that stuff. But at the same point, like, it's also there grabbing onto these emotions and our reactions to our exterior world. So, next time a similar instance happens, it could just cue that emotion without having to, stress the system and, worry about, they can just go with what the first response was. And so by doing that, in the name of efficiency, it limits us to that first programmed, emotion. And so, decades later, we're still, we don't like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or because, the dog barked at us and scared us while we were eating when we were 5 years old, right? Or we'd have a problem with money because, dad came home, upset about something, whatever. I mean, there are millions of different, possibilities for how these things or how these emotions get programmed and body. But yeah, the fact is, like, in our adulthood, we're actually being steered in the decisions we make by a child, by our own child and the experiences as a child. So
it's like I think it's like being, when you're in a car, you're in the back seat, and it just can go in any direction. And then when you go through the transition, then you become the driver, and where you're going.
Yeah. I felt lost for so long, just so lost and frustrated, And see, that's the thing that I realized through this work, is that the frustration is key. The frustration is our salvation, because the way, we were talking about the subconscious and conscious earlier, right? I was so frustrated because, I had friends and a family that were doing well. They had good jobs, and they were like taking care of themselves. And, I wanted the same thing, consciously. I'll imagine two different gears, right? And your top gear, you got your conscious intentions, like what you want, right? And then your subconscious is the bottom gear. So, and those are your the programmed emotions of your subconscious, right? So the first frustration that we feel is when those two gears are grinding against each other, right? You want this, but your subconscious is like, no, sorry. You want to lose weight, but it's like, oh, no. Or you want to stop drinking. No, you want to make money, or you want to start a business, but it's like, no. And that frustration, I found that, when you are frustrated, it's like, ding, that's the light. That's where we need to go after. There's the emotions there that we need to take care of. We need to connect with. We need to appreciate, and then move. And then, that frees up the space for you to step into a new potential.
With the NLP, then, like, how are you combining all the kind of breathwork, the whole lot? So I suppose let's look at somebody that has a problem. How would you kind of because I'm just conscious of the audience and everybody
Hmm.
knows something. Like, I mean, it's
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
in the last 2 years with this pandemic. It's like, everybody's experienced even more trauma in the house, fights
Oh, of
over
course.
money, losing jobs, relationships. So, like, what's the best kind of process to kind of go through? I know it's
Okay.
not an overnight success. Of course, it's a slow journey.
No, no. Well, the thing is, like, the process that I take people through is a 8 week process, and we work up. We go chakra by chakra. We focus on the heaviest emotions in each chakra. So, for example, what we'll do is we'll test around. So, for the first example, for the first chakra, we'll go through shame and guilt, and so we'll look for the emotions that the individual has attached to, it's anchored in their body, in their first chakra and around their body, to shame, to the instances that happen. And we use muscle testing to do that. And then we also look for the ages where that happened, right? So we do sometimes I use the first 3 ages, but depending on how old the person is, like we'll go we'll do even we'll find even more emotions. And also depends on like the trauma as well, and what we find. But yeah, we go through and we find those emotions and the ages that they occur, and then we connect with them. We connect with them on a mental level. We go back and we look at for any memories that are associated with that trauma at that age. And I like how you brought up trauma too, because one thing I want to point out, if you're listening, is that a lot of people see trauma as like what I was talking about earlier, like one of my car accidents or something like that, right? Well, a trauma could be trauma is an emotional response, right? So it can be as small as your mom looking at you wrong, or fussing at you for taking a candy bar off the shelf at the supermarket, or it can be like, I don't know, if you're 2 years old and a butterfly lands on your shoulder and freaks you out. I mean, it could be anything like that, right? Trauma is just an emotional response and your reaction to that stimuli. So yeah, so we connect with it on we connect with the trauma that we find on if there's any memories there, and if it's not, it helps, but it's not necessary. Then what I'll have an individual do is we'll go through and we'll scan the body to find out where they feel that emotion that we find that was attached to shame. Sometimes it's shame, sometimes it's anger, whatever it is. But we find it. I have them explore, close their eyes, and explore their body and find out where that emotion is stored. And then we use the meridian chart. There are specific release points on their body that are connected to the meridians where we find the emotions. And so we use that release point along with that Amo breath, that 3-part breath that I told you about, to move the emotion. And when that happens, it can be it's very pun and pun not intended, but it can be a very moving experience because we've connected on a memory, and then physically as well, and then we move it with the breath, and it's just yeah, it's nice to when an individual does connect with it and then and realizes, like, that emotion, like, I put it there, you know I'm responsible for it being there, but I'm also responsible for it leaving now. So, and the thing is, like, it's not something, when we do find these emotions, it's not something to beat yourself up over. Like, I kind of did that when I had this first epiphany. I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this I've been doing this to myself. I've been limiting myself and self-sabotaging myself, and like almost literally trying to kill myself, for decades, right? But the thing is, like, these emotions that we program and that we use to dictate how our lives unfold, they've created the person that we are, right? So in a way, we have to say, well, I am this way because I am the way I am because of the decisions I've made, which are based on the emotions that I've embodied, that I've anchored. So in a way, I have to thank, that emotion and my subconscious for helping, for molding me in that way. And now I can use the experience that I've gained from those experiences and move forward with the knowledge that now I can make choices on my own. Because that's one of the most beautiful parts of this work is that, or any work where you experience these epiphanies or self-awareness. And for me, self-awareness is like conscious recognition of the thoughts, words, deeds, emotions, and energy that you're giving off that are using to affect the relationships in your life, right? So once you have that awareness, you're like, whoa, okay, I've been doing this. So now I know I can keep doing this and I can keep getting the same results. Or now I can choose something different and see what that leads me. And yeah, I mean, that is so freeing because it's, yeah, now you have and choice. You have a choice. You can make it now without being, guided, without that gear, without having that frustration from the subconscious and conscious programs
Like
fighting each
I
other.
went through losing kind of everything, losing my own houses and lots of businesses and everything. And the pain was kind of about all the ones that had fraudulently done stuff to me. And as soon as I let it go, I got that through kind of a 6-stage meditation process. And it was like the act of forgiving. And you just
Yeah,
forgive them. And then I just go through the journey of like, what was their journey? Why did they become who they are? Like, because you've like the unconditional love for a baby, but somebody obviously influenced them to make them become who they were. And then would you hate the baby? No, of course not. So, and by just doing that, it just freed me. And everything after that was great.
that's awesome, man. How long did it take you to move through that process of forgiveness?
It, it was maybe 2 years, I'd say.
Mhm.
Year, maybe a year. Like
Nice.
I started doing the meditation and it definitely helped me. And then I don't know, I would think maybe a year or two. And like, because there's some that you start forgiving, but the big ones, it took a
Yeah,
bit, it
they
took a
take work,
bit.
right?
Yeah, they take work. And now it's like nothing. And then also the thing I say to people as well is like sometimes when people are telling the story, like I can tell any of the stories of the things that happened and it doesn't affect me, but some people
Yeah.
relive it and they go
Oh,
back
exactly,
into the
right.
zone. And I say you need to kind of come to terms with it yourself before you start sharing it around because you're really hurting yourself. And it's like, you said at the start to love yourself and just have forgiveness and everything. Once you get to that, you no longer go through that, the poor me kind of thing, because then you're getting the information and the support from the people that you're telling the story for, and you're just going in a vicious circle and you never get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Myself, I was stuck in that cycle of just like, and I didn't think so, I was just like, these things had happened to me. And I was like, I would tell the story, but like, looking back on it and like, man, I used to like, I'd feed off that story, and feed off the pain that I had suffered and the pain. I wore that pain and like the suffering like a badge of honor, right? And then once you lose, once you let it go, it's like, yeah, it's just something happened, but that's me. Like, that's just what happened. It's not who I am anymore. So it's cool, man.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. I think you become bulletproof after that. It's like you go through something like that, you just look at the world differently. You don't
Yeah,
let things.
totally, right.
Yeah, yeah. And with what you're doing, then is it only kind of in situ, or can it be done online, like when you're dealing with people?
Yeah, yeah, can do online. Yeah, totally do online. So one of the first things I started working with an individual, and when I started doing this on my own, I started working with a lady, and she was up, and I'm in the south of Taiwan, and the second largest city in the country called Kaohsiung, and the woman I was working with was up in Taipei, and so we were doing online work, and then there were some issues with internet. So I think it's one of the last sessions that we did, we actually did over the phone. We started a Zoom meeting, but then the connection was so bad. I was like, let me call you. Let's see if this works. And we went through the same thing. And what I found through that was that, the separation that we experience in life is like created by our, like we create the separation, right? Because everything is energy and we're all connected. And if there's separation, it's because we have created it ourselves. So we have the power to connect with each other from here to the moon. So, and it's a pretty, it's just really amazing. It's amazing how we're, in this world that we're in now, post COVID, even like during the whole COVID thing, like people are waking up and, they're really getting exposed to a lot of different methods of healing and awakening. And it's obviously, a few years ago, I might have looked at things, even before I, found this work, I was kind of down on things and down on the world and how, how all the wars and this and that and the global warming and we're going to hell in a handbasket. But, it's there are a lot more reasons to be hopeful about things than there are to, kind of, for lack of a better word, crap on everything, right? It's just
I
I
think
think we're in
that's
an
that's
exciting
kind
time.
of it's important to touch on because I mean I just know it from a lot of the people that are fighting the fight with this exposing stuff, and a lot of them get very down on it. I don't do that. I don't let it come into me. It is
Mhm.
what it is. And the thing is, the media is so controlled that all we hear and see is negativity. And like people don't even realize every hour on you're listening to the radio, they have to put on 5 or 7 minutes of negativity. Like,
Oh,
what is doing to your head? And when you turn that
I
off,
know,
when you
right?
don't listen to it,
Yeah,
then you start seeing the amount of beautiful things happening in the world. And
exactly.
and you just don't let the fear get to you.
Exactly. I love that. That's a really good point. I stopped listening or watching the news, or like even checking online news or anything, probably about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And it wasn't until recently and after that, I've always been a big sports fan. So ESPN was like my daily check-in, right? I would see what's going on with football and basketball and soccer and like everything, right? The sports, I wanted to know what was going on. But then it was funny, like about a year ago, I started looking at, what I was reading on ESPN, and I was like, dude, this is one big like soap opera. And like, even with the sports, like all they want to do is inject, like this person said this to this person, right? This person is in trouble for doing this. This part, like it's, and it's even in sports, they make it negative. So yeah, I mean, uh, I checked in recently with the NBA playoffs just to see what's going on. And then during the Super Bowl, I was checking in, but like my daily check in with ESPN is I'm finished with it.
I remember I don't know when it was, but I was in the States and I had to fly from New York to Chicago or
Mhm.
to San Francisco around that area.
Mhm.
And on the plane there was like CNN and you couldn't turn it off. And it's like you have children looking at this, and the same in the house. Like I make sure my youngest child, he's 8, and it's like I don't allow the radio on. I don't want him to see that. And it's like
Mm.
most people don't. They're like we're talking really of what's this going into your cells at a very young age. Like even
Mhm.
now, they're telling the kids wear a mask, get jabbed. There's this, there's that, and they're terrified. And then they're talking about the war. Like a child of 5 and 7 are conscious of all this stuff now. Like
Mhm.
that is serious problems for the future. Like,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and that's what we were talking about earlier, right? It's like, it doesn't like these things, these traumatic things that happen to us, we don't even have to be aware of it, right? Our subconscious is just like at that age, just like sucking things in like a vacuum cleaner, right? So, the kid might be playing like Legos and over, they might not, consciously, acknowledge, somebody getting shot on the news or something like that, but like boom, subconscious does. So
no, exactly.
scary,
And I
man.
mean, all the stuff that you see on the television now. Like, I mean, I was even seeing that years ago. I've seen if I curse, people freak out, and to me, it's nothing. In Ireland, it's like a form of endearment. It's just nobody takes offense to it. But
Right.
yet, I can see somebody getting decapitated. I can see somebody half naked gyrating on the stage,
Yeah,
and war and everything, and that's all cool.
I
Like
know.
the whole lot is conditioned, and people like even if you look at all the games for the children, all
I
war
know.
games and everything, and people are happy let their children off. They're not disturbing them. You like we
You're
have to.
disturbing him in a
We
different way.
yeah, we have to look deep within ourselves, but also there's a sponge next to us, and you have to make sure, am I putting clean water into that sponge or dirty water? And if you look around, 95 or plus percent, it's dirty water going into that
I
sponge.
agree. I agree. Yeah, we
So what's the
have to
best
be
way?
conscious.
How do we, I suppose, with the fear factor of the people that are going through this thing, because even in the houses, like when there's fear there, what's the best way? What's it from your experience and just dealing with people when they're living in fear?
Fear. Well, the thing is with fear, right? Like, so fear is a future-based emotion, right? So like right here, right now, like we're good. All is good. Like, you're in your house, I'm in mine. Like, we're both, we have a roof over our head. Like I'm sitting here and I'm comfortable, right? I'm having a great conversation with you and everything's good, right? The minute we step out of that and like start projecting what's going to happen next, then that's when, that fear creeps in. This is a trick that I used for overthinking. And then like, man, this works so well for overthinking, and would work for fear as well, because overthinking is pretty the same thing. It's just your mind just running a story that you're creating. And then it's like a tumbleweed or a snowball, right? It starts off small with like one's like maybe semi fact that's probably not even a fact at all, right? Then you start padding that story, and next thing you know, it's this huge thing. You're like, oh my God, oh, what in the world's gonna end? The way to stop that is just, if you can catch yourself thinking or overthinking or fear in that fear moment, just ask yourself, is it true? All right. And the thing is, like, most of the time you can, like, probably 95% of the time you can say, no, it's not true. Even the things that we see in our lives are not, it's only from our perspective, right? We don't have all the facts about it. I got an interesting story to highlight this point. My wife and I we live on the coast of Taiwan, like literally like live on a cliff, and like the ocean is like, I can throw a golf ball into the Pacific Ocean. And so on the weekends, we go down, there's a little sports center that we go down to, and we got kayaks and paddle boards and stuff like that. So we'll go down there and play in the ocean. Well, a few weeks ago, we go kayak, and we hadn't been out in a long time, and we're just paddling right up the coast, just beautiful, having a beautiful paddle. And I look up in the distance, and one of the cliffs, it looks like there was a hole in the cliff, like, and I was like, oh my God, I was like, sweetheart, have you look at that? Is that like because it was right around the time of rainy season. And I was like, wow, is that like a big landslide that just like carved out a big hole in that cliff? And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, that's huge. Like, you drive like a bus through that thing. And so we're paddling and paddling, we get closer and closer. And the closer we get, we're like, holy cow, that's like huge. I can't believe we've never seen that before. How did we miss that? And then like right as almost where we got on it, we both looked at each other and like, oh my God, that's not a hole. It was a tree that was sitting on the cliff, right? But the sun was hitting it at an angle that illuminated it, and it made it look like it was like there was a hole in this cliff, but it wasn't. It was just a tree. And so the thing is, like, we had thought, and we were like dead set on believing that there was a hole in this cliff. And then come to like, when, once we got on there, it was like, no, our mind was just not our mind, our eyes were playing tricks on us, and everything. It was just an illusion. So
But that's life. We keep telling ourselves a story, and it's like,
yeah,
and even when you're talking to somebody, it's like there's your side, there's my side, and there's the truth, and we
yeah,
all
exactly.
and like, I know from a lot of people, you have a thought process of something that happened in the past, and you discuss it with the family, and everybody's got a different version, and you're like, what's the real truth? It's our mind plays a lot of tricks on us.
Exactly.
So is your plan to, because like, I think it's so important what you're doing, because there's so much suffering going on, and like, are you able to kind of share what you're doing and get more people around the world doing? Is that that you could actually that people could learn it, a kind of coaching system that you have others doing this to replicate it and kind of reach millions?
That is what I would like to see happen. That is actually my plan, to bring people. I don't I'm not big on like the whole certification program, like, hey, pay me this and like I'll give you a gold star and you can go, like, I think that's BS, man.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, because like the stuff that I learned from an individual, like, I took that and then I was not happy with what I had, what with the results. So I took it further and developed it further. And like, my thing is to help other people take it further themselves, right? And, and use what I've done as a foundation to help themselves further, to help their family members, to help their friends. And yeah, that's yeah, I do see that happening.
No, excellent. And like, say when there's alcohol, I've seen that's all through life. There's always some family of someone, there's so many people, but they all kind of hide it as well. They don't want nobody
Mm-hmm.
else to know. What's the best way of dealing when somebody's in the family's got it? And sometimes they don't want the help, or does it have to be them that basically decide, yeah, I can do it? Because a lot of the time, the whole family unit is breaking up because of this, and you have to kind of
Mm-hmm.
intervene. What's your kind of thoughts on that one?
Yeah. The thing is, like, it can be alcohol, it can be drugs, it can be food, it can be work. I mean, work is socially acceptable, right? But work crushes just as many marriages, I'm sure, as alcohol and drugs and stuff like that, right? So it's like, pick your poison. But so we all have something, but like when you're like, you have to make the decision that, it's your time to make a change, right? You've got to be ready to make a change. You can't be like, I had family members, try to talk me into, going to AA and doing this stuff. Like when I was drinking, like in my heyday, like at my highest point, I was a case of beer a day, like 24.
Wow.
And that was Bud Light American beer, right? So it's like watered down. But anyway, and then at night I was drinking Jack Daniels to put myself to sleep. And you could have told me, like, and I had people like, dude, you're drinking too much. I'm like, whatever, it's not. But when you've got to make that decision. Nobody else can make it for you. So I think that for a family member or a friend that's going through that, I mean, I think the best thing you can do is be a friend to that person, and show compassion for what they're going through. I hate to say don't. Be careful with judgment, because they are the way they are, and they're drinking the way they're drinking, they're working the way they're working, they're doing whatever the thing that they're doing that's detrimental to their relationship with you or the individual that's going through it. They're doing that, not because it's, fun, not because they're like, whoa, this is great, I want to ruin my life. No, there's programs that that they're hanging on to, that they've anchored, that are causing them to do that. Consciously, I didn't want to run I didn't, my dad gave me the car 10 days before I wrecked it. It wasn't, anyway. So I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to wake up in the hospital room with like, dozens of broken bones and like hundreds of stitches and staples like littered on all over my body. I look like Frankenstein with my clothes off. And then 2 years later, I got hit by a car skateboarding. I was drunk. The car ran over my leg and I almost lost my leg. I got a staph infection. I was in a wheelchair for months. I had a needle going into my chest and went straight into my heart to take because the antibiotics that I was on were so strong, it would have collapsed any like regular vein, right? I didn't want that, you know. I didn't ask for that. Consciously, I didn't want that. But that was that was the emotion that I programmed were leading me down that destructive path. And so, yeah, just compassion and I think that's the biggest thing, because
Mm.
Amo Ni is I love you, right? And we're basically healing with love and with compassion. I named it that because The first book I read when I started this journey was called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, I think. Yeah. And so I got this sticky note and I put it on my bathroom mirror at the time and it said, I love you. And I looked at it and after like a couple of weeks, I just tore it down because I hated looking at it. I was like, oh, I hate myself. And then once I went through this work and I finally uncovered these emotions and I learned to love the person that I had become, I was finally able to say, yes, man, I love you. So those three words are so, so powerful. And so, I know when people are, people acting out against you and, family members or friends or spouses or whatever, that it hurts, but, do the best you can to under to try to understand that they're not doing it out of just meanness.
Yeah, no, I mean it's all true compassion because I mean who's ever changed with somebody complaining? At the end of the day, it just makes it go further deeper. If you're feeling pain and somebody just complains, it doesn't bring you up, it brings you down. And
Yeah,
unfortunately,
exactly.
even though they're trying to do the best for the person because they want them to change, they just don't do it in the right way. And like you're dead right, it's true compassion that you
Yeah,
do.
yeah, just like empathy, that's really huge. Just understanding, it's not to hurt you. That nobody's. It's just it's the way we're programmed, and going through, having that empathy, having that compassion will help you, help you as an individual grow as well. It's funny because like, I think like in that situation, you know, look at what you can do for yourself to make yourself a better person. Don't try to change that person because, you know, we can't heal others until we first heal ourselves, right? And so by us becoming the change that we want to see in other people, we sometimes effortlessly affect them. And like, it's like that's happened in all the relationship that I surround myself with, right? I mean, I now have completely different relationships with people that I never had anything to do with years ago, and it's just because I personally have changed.
And just kind of finally is on the breath work. What kind of breath work were you doing? And do you have a process as well for now to just kind of stay in flow?
Yeah, I do. I do the work that I do now probably once a week just for clearing any like any emotions that I've been going through, that I've been experiencing during the week, because I've got all the root stuff. I've got all that cleared out, and it's more like housekeeping now. Uh, it's kind of like, if you're going to lose weight, you can't just eat one meal, right? One healthy meal. If you can't, if you want a nice body, you can't go to the gym once, right? It's got to be routine, right? You got to keep it up and stay on top of it. So I do that. And breath work for me is like really, really important. That's something I do almost every day. I'll do some Wim Hof breathing to really help boost my immune system. And then at the end of my Wim Hof sessions, I'll do some push-ups and then I'll sit back up and I'll do some meditation, starting with the Amo breath that I told you about. So the Amo breath it's a three-part breath. So Amo in Spanish means I love, right? So it's AMO. So with the A part of the Amo breath, it's a ah. So we're visualizing light coming down from above, down to our crown, down through our throat, and into our chest, right? And then it's almost like the Om sound from the universal sound, the meditation sound. And so we imagine that light coming down, and as we do that, we're connecting with the emotions that we when I'm doing the coursework. Imagine the emotions that we're connected with, swirling into the heart center, and that part comes with the so with the M, so it's and that's the humming part, right? That's the step that stimulates the vagus nerve, and with that humming, we're imagining that light that we pulled in, like swirling clockwise in our chest, and it does pulling those emotions that we connect with. And with the O, the third part of the breath, we're like, oh, and we're imagining that energy, all of that collective energy being expelled out of our chest. In the 80s, there was this cartoon called the Care Bears, and they were sitting there and like shoot like love or whatever out of their chest when they were fighting the enemy. So it's kind of cheesy, but that's
And like with the ohm, because I heard of with the polar shifts or whatever. I mean that no longer works, and I've heard of is better. So like, have
uh-huh.
you heard? Yeah, but I think we just kind of know ourselves, because when you do something and it works, you just know, you just feel
Yeah,
it.
exactly. I did not know the whole polar shifting and thing. No, it's exactly what you said. Like as I was going deeper with this work before this the Amo breath kind of came into my consciousness. The one of the biggest emotions that I was experiencing as I was releasing these old traumatic wounds was anxiety. And man, the anxiety would riddle me. I mean, just like, oh, I was almost like one of those classic examples of like somebody with a paper bag, just like, you know, I didn't wasn't that bad, but it was pretty bad. And that's where, yeah, I was doing it one day and I was like, because my wife had been through like a Reiki course before I went through this work. And so she was helping me every once in a while. I was like, I need some help. And she would, put her hands on me and help me calm down with using Reiki. And I was like, I love my wife, but I like doing things on my own, and I don't want to bother, like every time I'm like, oh, I kind of feel like, I don't want to bother you. Like I want to take care of it myself. And so, yeah, as I was doing this work, it was just one of those things, like things just started piling in and adding up. And I was like, huh. And then I started doing it. I was like, whoa, this works, man. Holy cow. And anxiety gone.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, both thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I know you're helping people, and at the end of the day, I hope that you're able to actually teach more to do this, because the ripple effect, and just, yeah, I think even people just listening to the conversation, just different things to try as well, because everyone has their own little journey. And
Yeah, of course.
because we've touched on a lot of different things that it's worth trying. I mean, even the breath work, all different things, and just give forgiveness for yourself as well. Because yeah, why beat yourself up of something that you've done in the past? It's done. You can't. We don't have it in a time clock. Yeah, go back and change that. There's no point in beating yourself up. It is what it is. But you can be a new person tomorrow. You don't have to be the same person you were yesterday.
True, true. Yeah, the thing is, like, beating yourself up, that's part of the program too, right? We hanging on to the past, and by doing this work, we can let go of those past things. But that's one of the reasons I try not to say don't do this or don't do that, because those are instructions that we read, right? And as we're learning to get better and we're learning to master our own selves, it's like, do this or don't do this, right? And then if you don't do it, or you do it, you feel like a loser, right? You're like, oh man, like so and so said don't do this, but I did it. It's like, why am I doing that? And the thing is, like, the reason you're doing that and the reason you don't know like how to stop is because that's one of the programs, right? That's something that you got to let go. And by connecting with that stuff, then we can move forward without being hung up on that thing.
No, it's
So
very important what you just said, because that's what happens. Like, you're trying to improve, and then you start beating yourself up, because whether it's
yeah,
eating or drinking, and you just have a bad day or whatever, you don't want to be, because then by beating yourself up, your emotions go down, the vibrations go down, and then you go back into the cycle.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, no, love it, love it. Listen, both thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, definitely check out the website. It's amoniclear.com. Also, if like the breath work resonated with you, check out my YouTube channel. The Amo breath is on my YouTube channel, so you can check that video out and watch it and figure out how to do it on yourself. I'd recommend doing it before like a meditation. It'll like totally chill you out and like make it just really give you, and it makes you feel, this fills you literally with love. So that's it. Yeah, thanks, Roy.
Yeah, perfect. I'll make sure I put it in the audio on the video. Thank you very much. That's all for the Awakening Podcast. You can find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org, as mentioned from BitChute, and all about me and my other podcasts and my coaching you'll find on bio.link/podcaster. Until next week, take care.